Hello and welcome to this short video. In it we will discuss about democracy and capitalism and its influence in the Middle East. And also we will check in their progress until the 19th century and more. Hope you enjoy it. So let's get into democracy. Democracy, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is a political system in which the power is given to the people. Now, what does that mean? That means that everyone, or at least the idea is that everyone, should have the right to vote and to take direct action in political decisions, such as choosing their president or political representatives. And that was the case first in ancient Greek, and then later it will come back into European countries later in the 18th century. Now, what we know now as democracy has been a long way of evolved political systems, because at first women weren't considered even as citizens, therefore they didn't have the right to vote. Also, black men didn't have the right to vote. A lot of people, mostly only white men, were allowed to vote and take actual consideration into political system. Also, then it changed to people with property. Only men with property will be the ones to vote. And then later to what we know now as to democracy, in which everyone can vote, everyone has the right to vote. So capitalism. Capitalism is the current system used by most countries. And well, what is it based and what's the history of it? It started at first as a political economical system. It is still used as one, and most of the ideas that define capitalism were defined and created by Adam Smith, a philosopher of the 18th century. Now, Adam Smith had some basic ideas of what capitalism should be and how it should work. The basics of it were that the capitalists, or the people in power, the owners of the great factories and the ones who paid the workers, should pay a fixed amount of money to the workers, one that should be enough for them to pay for most of their stuff. Why? Because if the workers, who are also the consumers, didn't have enough money to buy the products that most of them were producing in the first place, that would mean that the capitalists wouldn't get the money because no one will be buying their product, and therefore they wouldn't have enough money to pay the workers, and that will make a circle, a dystopic circle. Moving on to next. One of the great things about capitalism, and the reason why it has been working so far pretty good, it's because the system regulates itself, at least in most cases. What does that mean? Well, let's say that someone is selling bread for $3, and another guy starts selling bread for $2. The guy who's selling bread for $2 will start selling more because people will actually buy the cheaper product, and that will force the guy who was selling bread for $3 to sell it to $2 or lower. It's a constant competition between dealers and sellers, and that's the reason why capitalism usually works as a system. Also, Adam Smith, in his ideas and books, pointed out something very important that is not being followed nowadays, which is that we shall not allow monopolies. What is a monopoly? Well, it basically consists of one market being regulated by one seller. That will mean that there is no fight between two sellers here. There is no guy who is selling bread for $2 and another guy who's selling for $3. There's just one guy, and if that happens, if there's only one person who's selling you that product, that will mean that he gets the right to decide whether the price should be really expensive or really cheap, and most of the time it will be extremely expensive. That has happened before with companies such as Standard Oil and others. Oil is a very important aspect of the Middle East, and we'll see why later.
Level of democracy in the 19th century in the Middle East. During the 19th century, the Middle East was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. The form of government of the Ottoman Empire was a monarchy, which was divided in two parts, the military administration and the civil administration. The highest political position was the Sultan, who was the supreme monarch. In the Ottoman Empire government, the state had power over the clergy, and the main responsibility of the state was to expand their territory. So, as we can see, in the 19th century, the Middle East had no democracy. They lived under the rule of a monarch imposed by the Ottoman of capitalism in the 19th century in the Middle East. As it was said before, the Middle East was ruled by the Ottoman Empire during the 19th century. The economy of the Ottoman Empire was based on the agriculture. The Ottomans saw the military expansion as the main source of wealth, and they considered agriculture more important than commerce and manufacture. The Western countries were moving towards capitalist economies. They gave more emphasis to manufacturing and industry, expanding their market, making trade with more countries, while the Ottomans focused on the territorial expansion and
In the late 24th and early 23rd centuries before Christ, Sargon and Akkad conquered much of the Levant and Mesopotamia.
Other powers in the region at that time included the Hittite and Assyrian experience in Greece and Asia Minor. Disease and tribe.
In the 900 BC, the sophisticated Garamantes Empire had arisen in Libya's Wadi al-Hayat, from where it controlled Saharan trade routes that connected to Central Africa to the Mediterranean rim.
This facilitated the spread of Islamic many centuries later along the well-established livestock route. The Umayyads gave the Islamic world some of its greatest articular treasures, including the Dome of the Rock Jerusalem and the Mount Bos Damascus.
History, however, has not been a kind remembering the largely for the living corruption, nepotism, and tyranny that eventually proved to be their undoing. In
1705, on Ram 12 in the revolt for the
successors and the strong arm of the behind revolt were the Abbasids.
The Abbasids completely created a new capital in Baghdad and early centuries of the Islamic country that went often renowned as the Golden and Age Islamic culture.
The most famous of the Abbasid caliphs was Harun al-Rashid, one of the 1001 Nights.
Where King Harun al-Rashid led one of the most successful and Muslim invasions of the Bankum, almost reached center of flight.
We can also add to our conclusion that the Middle East is still ongoing democracy and capitalism progress in general. Groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda has destabilized many countries in the region, and we can be sure that one day they will reach the quote-unquote enlightenment that the rest of their nearby countries have.